might be my most prolific year at the LA Times in terms of everything that I wrote about, everything that I covered.
I think we know why he's
the awards, proclamation for Congress, I was kicking ass in 2024, and yet I find myself completely uncomfortable. As much as I resisted even just having my name out there first on anything, the reality is I kind of run out of places to hide. I keep next level. There is no next level for me. I've worked at basically every major newspaper, every major television station, and I've worked in all the major cities. The next level is just me. I've built a career looking at the intersection of sports, NBA gets it right, culture, because you wanted to check my black card, and politics. I see it as a reflection of and this will continue to be an extension of that.
If the money's no good or the location.
To find a comedian who believes that,
Welcome to the LZ Granderson Show. Welcome to the LZ Granderson Show. I am your host, LZ, and it's, post-election time, and I would love to have a fantastic conversation with you about what had happened, but I'm more concerned about what is happening. I'll explain. I believe there are three essential components to healthy democracy. There's the elected official, there are the voters, and then there's the political opposition. This conversation that I want to have is about the latter, political opposition, and this is what I mean. According to Ballotpedia, of the nearly 14,000 total elections across 30 states that were covered by this group this week, 60% of those elections were uncontested. You know what that means? That means the number of candidates on the ballot was less or equal to the number of seats up for election. We had nearly 1,800 mayoral elections in addition to Mamdani in New York. And did you know that 60% of the people who got the job of mayor didn't even have political opposition to get the job? It was a completely uncontested election. Now, I'm not saying it's a problem because I think that the winner lacks legitimacy. That's not my argument. The problem is, if you don't have political opposition, then you don't have a healthy political debate. If you don't have a healthy political debate, how do you know the solutions you're implementing are actually the best ones available? In addition to the fact that you need political opposition just so that the performance of voting isn't just a performance. Remember, the whole point of democracy is to have a choice. But if you have a false sense of a choice, or if you have uncontested elections, yeah, you can still have an election day, but you don't truly have democracy. And that's what this conversation is going to be about today with the gubernatorial candidate, Antonio Villaraigosa. See, he's always run for something, right? Since the 1990s. And a lot of people like to mock him, saying, hey, you're past your time. And certainly with the retirement of Representative Nancy Pelosi, with the way that Joe Biden's candidacy ended, even watching, President Trump right now and seeing elements of his age appear, quite often now, we are reminded of our own sort of mortality. And we also are reminded that, hey, maybe it's time to get in some new people, some fresh blood. And I asked him about those questions. His answers, they convinced me that, age is just a number. And that, wow, yes, it is true that you can certainly look at the fact that we have examples of people who are 50, 60, and 70 who look as if they're 80, 90, or 1,000. We also have tons of examples of people who are 90, 80, and 70 who move and groove like they're 30 and 40. And so I think it's a mistake just to kind of lump in people based solely upon the numbers. It's about an individual. So maybe he has convinced me that, age is just a number. Or maybe I'm feeling that way because I can see the gray hairs coming. I had a hip replacement. Either way, the conversation I have with Antonio Villaraigosa is fantastic. I hope you enjoy. Mayor Villaraigosa, you've been running for something for quite some time. I want to go back to the beginning because my essay is on the number of uncontested elections, meaning there's a number of elections where people just aren't having a choice. There's one person and that's who they get for that office, whatever the office is. And there seems to be a rise in that. And I wanted to talk to you because you represent someone who runs for something. And I want to go to the very beginning. What was happening in your community? What was going on in your life that made you decide, you know what, I need to run for something?
Well, I don't know if that's how it started. I think Well, remember, I grew up in the 1960s and 70s as a young teenager. So I watched horrified the civil rights marches where dogs were sicked on human beings, fighting for the right to vote, fighting for civil rights and human rights. And I remember watching those images as a young boy. And so I was 15 years old, a third string halfback, and with some of the other halfbacks started the Black Student Union. And then a couple of months later, the United Mexican American Students got involved with the farm worker boycott. And so what I tell people, I grew up in a time of hope and optimism, a time of struggle and change. And I got swept up by that and involved as a young boy. And in the beginning, I never thought about running for office. I mean, that was never something that interested me. I actually thought at the time that those people were sellouts, if you will, and I wasn't interested. It wasn't. Then I became, a student leader at UCLA, chairman of MECHA, involved with the Third World Coalition, taking on the right after affirmative action, they started closing the door. As soon as they opened up those doors, they started closing them. And I kind of led that effort at UCLA, and then got involved with immigrant rights and later with unions. And I was, involved in the civil rights movement, in the Chicano movement. Met Karen Bass as an example in 1973 in the Coalition Against Police Abuse. So I've been involved my whole life, never thought of running until I got involved in Jesse's campaign. And even then, I didn't really think of running. I thought of supporting people that were change agents that had come out of the civil rights movement, that wanted to make America all that it held itself to be. So it wasn't really till 1994 that I actually ran for office and won the first office that I ran for, which was the state assembly. But I'd already been, president of the ACLU, already been on the RTD and MTA boards, already been involved as an activist for 25 years before I first ran. And then once I ran, I realized that, I could be a change agent, that I could move the needle on civil rights, on human rights, on civil, social justice. And that's kind of how I first got involved. So it wasn't thinking of it. I wasn't the guy that everybody thought was going to make it. I got kicked out of Catholic school, partly for leading the walkouts, but, bad grades, fighting all the time. Go to a public school and they put me in, basic reading, math classes, even though I had come out of a college prep situation, upholstery class. And then I dropped out, and God is good. And I had a great mom and a great country. And I went back, finished up at night school. So I wasn't the guy that was always thinking about running for office. That wasn't me. But I was thinking, since I was a young man, about changing the world.
Who told you not to run for office? Once you made that choice, was there anyone around you saying, don't do it, you'll be a sellout, for example?
Oh, yeah. You'll be a sellout. You'll never win. You're too progressive. People like us don't get elected. And I didn't buy it. I put it all up there. The theme of the first campaign was the courage of his convictions. And so we said Prop 187 was on the ballot, the anti-immigrant initiative. 3 strikes, you're out was on the ballot. I was the immediate past president of the ACLU, and I was against the death penalty. And I used all of those. I put them out there. I'd actually gone to Cuba in 1977 with the Venceremos Brigade. I put it out there. I said I was building housing, and I was. By the way, when I left there, I realized there wasn't freedom. And so that kind of tempered me as well when I finally got involved in electoral politics, almost 18 years later.
So who are the people saying they don't, elect people like us? And what do they mean by us?
People in the movement, people who had come out of the civil rights movement, the Chicano movement, the immigrant rights movement. They former president of ACLU at the time, that wasn't necessarily something that you ran on, but I wore it as a badge of courage. And that's why in the end, we said the courage of it, the theme was, I didn't come up with it, my folks did, the courage of his convictions. Maybe you won't agree with him on everything, but one thing's for sure. If he believes in something, he'll fight for it, even if he's fighting alone. And, then got elected. 3 weeks after I got elected, Willie Brown makes me majority whip. 2 years later, I become majority leader. And 3 years after I got elected, I became speaker. But never was the guy thinking about running. So I think what they thought at the time was someone like us that had come out of the movement won't get elected. And I just didn't buy it. It was a civil rights created district. There were 6 Latinos in the race. It was a civil rights created district to an elected Latino because it was Latino majority, though, European majority when it comes to voters. There was something like 60% of the vote. And won, ran against an Anglo guy and won. We're lucky.
What did you do? How did you process your first victory?
Felt lucky. I knew that, he was a good guy, by the way. And spoke Spanish, Anglo guy who'd always worked in the Latino community. He was a decent guy. I felt lucky, and I felt like I've always felt, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I felt like I needed to fight for the people that I'd grown up with, the people that had been left behind. And, that kind of was what drove me. And I think when I first got there, I was definitely different. I think.
How old were you?
I was probably 39 or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I got elected in I got elected in 1994. I was 41. So I'd already had a house and children. In fact, I think I'd already had 4 children. All 4 of my children I'd already had. And, so it wasn't like I was just running, first thing, 22 years old, and I'm going to run for office. I wasn't thinking like that.
So if you felt lucky for your first victory, how did you process your first loss?
Well, remember when I started out, I'd been, majority whip, majority leader, speaker. Most of the progressive legislation that came out in the 1990s came out in my 2 years of speakership. Largest expansion of healthcare, healthy families. I was the author. The biggest effort to clean up the air, the Carl Moyer Act, which helped incentivize the retrofitting of dirty diesel engines. Toughest assault weapons ban in America. And the list goes on. All the LGBTQ legislation that came out, anti-discrimination, employment and housing, the AIDS formulary that we focused on, all of that was me leading a caucus that had, before that, had tried to do some of those things, but hadn't been successful. And so getting a Democratic governor was helpful, right?
Right.
But I was driven, to take on a lot of those issues. And so when I finally ran for mayor, everybody thought I was crazy because I was only at 9% in the polls. Jim Hahn was at 76, name ID. Becerra, who's currently in this governor's race, was also at 9. 18 months later, I won. I beat in the primary. I beat Hahn 30-26 and Becerra 30-6, and I put a broad coalition. But when I first started talking about it, everybody thought I was absolutely insane. 9-76. How do you, had been in office. I think he had been in office for 16 or years or 20 years or something like that, and I've been in office 6. And in Sacramento, where people really aren't watching what you're doing. And then lose the runoff. If you remember, I was leading 10 days out, but they did a Willie Horton ad that made me look like a gang member, a drug dealer, and a Mexican. And I lost that race. Scared people. We can't trust Antonio Villaraigosa. It was basically, soft on crime. And 2 years later, I run against an incumbent who had a 69% approval rating. I got in the day before the day to file, which was November. And I think the election was in March. I won, and I beat a council member in a primary for one of the first times in LA history. I don't know if it was the first time, but certainly one of them. And then 2 years later, I run against Jim Hahn, the guy who beat me. And I had a group of 16 people, including my ex-wife, my best friends, all my supporters. We went around the room and everybody said, don't do this. You're going to be mayor one day. Everybody knows it. Just wait your turn. And I just felt like I should do it. I didn't like the way the loss came down the first time. In fact, was committed to kind of running a little bit of a different race. I think that first time I was too hot, scared people. And the second time I chilled a little bit and put an even broader coalition and was able to win that race. But every time I've won, I've always felt lucky, because I work hard for sure. Some people say I'm the hardest working person in politics. That's an exaggeration. I think there's a lot of hard workers, but I definitely I leave everything on the floor. I put everything I have in it.
So let's go back a second, back to that first loss, because you say you didn't like the way that it went down. One hand, you're sort of characterizing how they use race to sort of misrepresent you and what you were about. But on the other hand, you also said that you too came in a little hot. What would you say was the overall sort of lesson that you learned from that first defeat? Was it about the ugliness of politics and campaigning, or was it about, your own messaging?
When that ad came out, which was criticized, particularly in Democratic circles, really strongly. It was a Willie Horton type ad, scaring people, subtly saying he's not one of us. And Kendrick Lamar wasn't around. So, they were subtly saying I wasn't one of them. And that was weird because from the beginning, when I first ran in that civil rights created district, I said, I want to be a leader for everybody. When I became speaker, they wanted to make me the Latino speaker. And I said, no, I want to be everybody's speaker. And the same when I ran for mayor. So I actually took on the LA Times at the time. I took it all the way to the publisher, Purner and Carol, I think the managing editor, and said, why do you keep on describing me as the Latino candidate for mayor? I'm third generation American. My grandpa got here 120 years ago. I didn't even speak Spanish in the home. I do now. But I said, you're saying I'm different. I want to be everybody's mayor. I want to be a uniter. And that has always been, if you read anything about me, what people talk about is that I'm a coalition builder, that I've always been someone who understands, leaders have to bring everybody together. So I felt like a bit wronged, and I felt like I had to, win this time. And I did. But I always feel lucky, right time at the right place. People now had known me a little better. I wasn't scary to them, and won the Valley, and that took me over the top. I'd already had the first time I'd lost the African American community, primarily because Jim and his dad and his family had been very strong in those communities. His father was Kenny Hahn. And the second time, but I won the kids and I won progressives, young progressive blacks. The second time I won their parents. It wasn't until the third time I ran that I won the grandparents. Put a broad coalition together, and that won the primary and the runoff.
You brought up the generational thing, and President Obama brought up something a couple of weeks ago in terms of geopolitically where we are. And he sort of surmised that one of our biggest issues is that there are too many old men running things who don't know when it's time to go home. Was he talking about people like you?
It's funny because I've been asked that question, but as I've gone up and down the state, I've never been asked by one person that question. I have been asked by reporters, and I think it's a legitimate question in the sense that, I think elections are about the future, and nobody's impacted more going into the future than young people. But I have a young spirit, and I've been involved my entire life, and I believe that right now in this time, this state needs a leader who's done it before, a problem solver, a uniter. At a time when we're so polarized in our body politic, I think we need people that are focused on getting stuff done. Talking about young people as an example, I was 25 years old. I worked at a nonprofit, and I bought a house at 25 years old. Didn't have a rich father. I didn't have anybody to give me a down payment, but a house by Cal State LA back then was $42,000. I put 10% down. Today, for our kids, home ownership is not something they even think about. That their reality is 3 roommates and an apartment somewhere close to work, something that they can afford. And so this issue of a state that's not an economy that's not working for enough people is something that's in my bailiwick, because I've always believed we need that kind of society, an economy that's working for more people, a society where people can afford to pay rent, to buy gas, to pay utilities. And you said Obama, and from my vantage point, I think Obama understood that. We got to inspire people about what we can be. We can be that state again.
So why not use your experience, use all your wisdom and understanding to advise someone who's younger to take the baton? Why do you feel that you're the person that needs to have the baton at this particular moment still?
I actually do that. I mentor a lot of young leaders. Some of them are in the Congress. Some of them are in the state assembly, in the legislature, state senate. Some of them have been speakers and pro tems. Some of them have been mayors. Remember, I was also the president of all the mayors when I was mayor of LA, the president of the Conference of Mayors. And so what I would say is, if I saw that young person that I thought is ready, if one of them were in this race, as an example, I'd be behind him. But I haven't seen that person. And I think right now, we need somebody who's done it before. You mentioned age. My brother, I was in the gym this morning at 4:45. I'm in the gym virtually every day. I have a youthful spirit, and I'm blessed to have a healthy enough body that I can do this. But what I've made clear, I'd rather be transformative in 4 years than mediocre in 8. And there's no question, just as I did with mayor, I had 70% of color. No administration before me had ever had that. And actually, the next one didn't. I can tell you, I had the best and the brightest. Many of them are running things here in LA. Many of them have run for office. So I'm going to continue to cultivate young people. In my administration, you will see young people who I'm going to give an opportunity to take the reins of big agencies and make the change that we need to make this place more affordable.
So you're saying you're transformative in the sense of you're only looking for one term, one for a year, and then hopefully pass the baton?
I can't say I'm looking for one term, but I'm ready for it. Should that arise, I think the gravamen beneath the question is you're not the only person that can do this, but I've thrown my hat in the ring, and I've thrown my hat in the ring and believe in the maxim that Theodore Roosevelt, who was the namesake of my high school, Roosevelt High School, and that is that, the man in the ring, everybody can shoot arrows and Monday morning quarterbacks, but the man or the woman in the ring is the person that has to do the job. And I'm ready to do that. But I think there are a lot of folks ready to do that. They just haven't announced their candidacy. I don't think they come with the experience that I come with, and with the understanding that leaders bring the flock in. When I'm in a church and I'm doing a little preaching, I talk about the good shepherd. The good shepherd brings all the flock in. The good shepherd doesn't say no to the one-eyed flock or the brown-eyed flock. The good shepherd brings all the flock in. And my sense is we need a uniter right now at a time we're so polarized. And so when I was asked the question recently that was somewhat controversial for some, what would I say to the 40% of the people who voted for Donald Trump? I'd say, I respect you. I want to work with you. We don't have to agree on everything, but whether you vote for me or not, I will represent you. I think we need that right now. I think our politics is too coarse. I think we need more civility. Now, I'm not Pollyannish. I grew up in a tough neighborhood. I know how to fight. But I tell people, you can't just be against something. You got to be for something. And I learned that from my mom. I was 21 or 22 years old, and I said to my mom one day, it's very progressive, thought I was a leader of working people. And I said, you don't understand working people. And she whipped out at me, a single mom who raised 4 kids on her own, grew up in, a victim of domestic violence. She looked at me and stared at me and she said, son, I worked my whole life. Don't you tell me I don't understand working people. She goes, the problem with you, and I respect you, the problem with you, you're always against things. You're fighting for, for justice and civil rights, but you're always taking things on and demonstrating. She goes, when you grow up, people want to know what you're for. And I think we need leaders to know what they're for. I'm for an economy that works for more people. I'm for a California where people can buy a home again. I'm for a California where people can pay rent. And that's not happening right now. And so, I'm ready, willing, and like I think that the reason for this interview is most people don't come back in the way that I am, running in a tough race that nobody's watching right now. Let's be honest. It's almost, nobody really knows that people are running. It's just too much noise out there. And so I'm doing it because I think I could be the change agent I've been my whole life.
So there are a couple of things you said that I want to kind of go back and kind of explore. And the first thing is this idea of, you getting involved with politics because of Prop 187.
No, no. I first got involved in Jesse Jackson's campaign.
Texas campaign, but that proposition was one of the things that kind of registered with you early
Yeah.
on.
I was running in 1994, and Proposition 187 and Three Strikes Are Out were both on the ballot, and I was opposed to it.
What are your thoughts on Prop 50, which is the current proposition people are voting for on Tuesday?
Look, I think we've seen very clearly we have a man in the White House that wants to rig an election. That's what they're doing in Texas. The Texas legislature has voted to gerrymander Texas in a way to deny Democrats 5 seats. What's different about California is the people get to decide. If I had actually voted for the redistricting commission way back, and some of my friends were upset, but I do believe that the people have a right to voice their opinion about whether or not California is going to stand idly by while Texas, Ohio, Indiana, Florida, all looking to do a redistricting that will deny Democrats the vote and stop what many of us expect, and that is that they'll lose the House in the next cycle in 2028. So the difference here is the people get to vote. They get to decide. And I think a lot of people are concerned about the violations of due process, about the violations of free speech, about these immigration raids, which nobody signed up for. I think there's a sense, and I've said, as an example, I've never in my life seen people covered from head to toe like the Ku Klux Klan, unidentified, tackling, older people, young people on the ground with assault weapons and flashbang grenades, dividing children from their families at graduations and hospitals. We've never seen some of this. Tariffs, which disproportionately hit Californians, undermining our economy. So I think the people have a right to decide, and that's why I support Prop 50. And I'm going to vote for it.
Last question for you. As you know, this essay is about the rise of, elections where there doesn't seem to be an opponent, an uncontested elections. You're running for one of the biggest seats on the planet, governor of California. But there are thousands and thousands of elections all around this country, from school board to library boards. What would you say to the average American who has 2 jobs or doesn't have a lot of time? Why should they care that we have a rise in uncontested elections?
Democracy is a living, breathing thing, because democracy is about people organizing themselves to give them as a group voice. And, not everybody can run for office. Not everybody wants to run for office, but everybody needs to be involved civically. That book, Bowling Alone, which talked about the 1950s when people were bowling in leagues, and today where they bowl alone, talked about this need for participation. Alexis Tocqueville in Democracy in America talked about the same thing. And so I think everybody, no matter how busy, we have an obligation and a duty to participate, to read about what's going on, to understand, and yes, sometimes to run when necessary. In my case, I believe it's necessary. We got to stand up to the threat to our democracy, but we also got to fix the things we broke. And there's a lot broken. And so I'd say that every one of us, I don't care how many jobs you got, we got to we got to participate at some level in our church, in our unions, in our civic organizations, even if it's just, a little bit of your time. I believe that. I think that's the way we save our democracy. When we're participating, maybe not as much as some people, but every one of us have a responsibility to do that.
I'm so glad you characterized it that way. I started working on this essay, and one of the things that kind of was clear to me was that there's three different tiers of Americans. There's the voter, um, there's the non-voter, which represents about a third of eligible voters that we rarely talk about. And then there's this people who actually run for office. And, you need sort of people to run for office in order to have democracy work. And, in 2024, about 70% of all of our elections were uncontested, meaning there was no choice. And I kind of view that as meaning that democracy really wasn't at work. We had an election, but I think for me, the core of democracy, the very heart of it is the fact that you have a choice. And I think we've gotten away from participating, and people don't even have choices anymore to participate in democracy. Am I off on that?
No, I don't think you are. I think sometimes our democracies are on autopilot, and that's why it's under threat. I think too many of us look at politicians and expect perfection, and when they don't get it, they become cynical. And too many politicians are in it just for the power or the fame. I talked about the youthful spirit. I still have that spirit of a 15-year-old that wanted to change the world. I still believe in the power of people coming together to change the world. And that hadn't left me. I've been a mayor, I've been a speaker. So, tempers you a bit. You realize, you got to keep people safe. You got to balance budgets. You got to, make tough calls. But at the end of the day, I still have that spirit that government has always functioned for the rich and powerful. It's got to function for people that aren't that interested. But we also got to try to get them to be interested, because that's the only way to hold us accountable. When they're not interested, nobody runs against you. You run unopposed. You sometimes get drunk with your victories. And I think it's important to understand that, that kind of oftentimes leads to absolute power corrupting, and not necessarily just the legal definition of corruption, taking something ill-gotten and benefiting from it, but the corruption of our democracy that should be alive and vigorous.
Absolutely. Mayor Villaraigosa, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I really, really am so appreciative of your willingness to always participate in democracy. As I said, this is the heart of the essay. It's the heart of the theory that I'm sort of working on, that yes, we need people to vote, but we need people to run in order for democracy to be alive as well. So I really appreciate your willingness to step up civically in that way.
LZ, I have a lot of respect for you. Love your columns. So looking forward to reading this one. Thank you for having me on this podcast.